Hi there, thank you for joining. Today I'm going to talk to you about listening skills. Listening skills are one of those skills that are really important to business success and to your leadership development. And it's also one of these skills that over time we develop habits about. So today I want to talk about what habits might you have developed as it relates to your listening skills? Some of the contaminants that we allow into our conversation space that creates an obstacle to our listening. And then at the end, I want to talk about how do you know when your listening is improving? What kinds of things to look for as you experiment with deepening your listening? So first, let's talk about habits around listening. So generally, these habits are formed based on your experiences and the roles that you take on, but they do become a habit and permeates in whatever conversation you're having. So that's why it's interesting to look at our habits around listening. So let me give you some examples about what I mean. A lot of people might have habits for listening for solutions. So sometimes in leadership positions, we're always having people come to us with issues and we're always trying to help them find solutions. So as a result, our habit around listening is a repetitive pattern around when the person is talking, we're trying to identify the problem and we're trying to work on a solution. So that's a very, very common habit for leaders, listening. Another habit around listening could be listening for whether you agree or disagree. So throughout the entire time of your engaging, you're trying to determine whether it's fact or fiction, or you agree or disagree. Another example might be looking for implications and risks. So sometimes, depending on our role, our job was to build mitigation strategies or avoid risks. So we might always be listening for risks or weaknesses in an argument. Or sometimes we create a very dissociated listening habit with certain people where we're really not completely engaging. So those are some examples of habits can enter our listening. And again, the habit is not really here or there, but it gets overused. And so therefore it's important to understand your habit and see whether or not that habit is the appropriate one to allow yourself to default into depending on the conversation you're having. And then we can talk about contaminants. So common contaminants are that we either already know what we think they're saying, right? So we jump to conclusions around what they're saying. So our pattern recognition is extremely strong based on our experience. And when somebody is saying something, we think we already know it, which really contaminates our listening. The other is preparing our response. So the voice in our head is louder than the other person's voice. It's closer to our mind than the other person's voice. Therefore, if we are planning our response, we are really not able to listen. So that's another contaminant to listen. The other is judgments, being quick to be discrediting what the person is saying, or to be discrediting what the person is saying early in the conversation contaminates your listening. You're not able to understand the point before you're judging it. And any kind of personal attacks or attacks on their character or attacks on their credibility. So any mind chatter, not trusting this person, will contaminate your listening. So those are some of the habits and those are some of the contaminants. But if you are committed to improving your listening and you really see the value, and think about somebody in your life that is an amazing listener, and think about how that person makes you feel, how that person can influence you because of their deep listening and how much you value that person. And if you want to be a trusted advisor with any client or any leader or any colleague or any resource that works for you, you're going to want to have that same kind of relationship where you are deeply in trust and able to listen to each other. So as you reflect on people that provide that for you and you think about how can I be that more for other people, here are some hints on things you can monitor during your conversation to see if you are deepening your listening. So the first thing to think about is to pay attention to the shift. So there is a shift from superficial to depth in conversations. People always start out in superficial. People need to get through that superficiality before there's any depth. So you can all think about the time when you're passing the hall and you say, "How are you?" and someone says, "Fine." It's extremely superficial. But then if you pause and you say, "Did you have a good weekend?" they might share something like, "Actually, it was a really tough weekend because it was the anniversary of my father's passing," or something. And all of a sudden you see the entire shift in the conversation, entire shift in the relationship as you now have gone from superficial to more depth, as an example. Noticing this notion of superficial versus depth if you want to start to engage in a trusting conversation. And you can generally feel when it starts to deepen. So that's one way you can tell whether you're improving your listening. Another way you can tell is you notice feelings. So you notice, not only do you notice what they're saying, but you start to notice how they're feeling about it. Are they passionate and driven by what they're saying? Are they a little bit worried or nervous about what they're saying? Paying attention to those things and paying attention to word selection. Noticing feelings is another way to know that you're deepening your listening. And as you're noticing feelings, you'll start to notice values and criteria. So identifying, okay, obviously this person just shared with me that they have an incredible sense of urgency to complete a certain task. So obviously a value to them is driver value and accomplishment. So you start to get a sense of like what is the engine behind this conversation that you're having. So you can notice the values that are going on in the conversation. And then what you can do is you can start to notice if your interaction is shifting them. You can start to notice, are they locked into a position, or where have they identified evolution in their thinking, or where have they identified areas where you can support them and provide input that would be welcome to them. So really it's an exercise in getting out of your routine habits, your habit of like solution, problem, risk, mitigation, answer, agree, disagree, very, very automated patterns, and really looking at a conversation and a listening approach that is looking for that journey and that depth. So I hope that's helpful. This week, your assignment, all I want you to do is pay attention to your listening. Pay attention to see what your default mode is. Pay attention to see what your contamination, the noise chatter is, and then pay attention to see if you are noticing the evolution and the depth of the conversation during your listening. I hope that helps. Have a great week.